All right, guys. This here is for Thursday, February 11th, for sixth period. This paper is not in your notes, so feel free just to kind of follow along, maybe sketch some of the figures just on a scratch sheet or a back side of one of the notes. There's a couple things in here that I wanted to go over that was not part of the original notes packet. All right. So let's start here by just reviewing what we have been working on. Remember, we've been working on sine, cosine, and tangent here for each of these. So sine, cosine, and tangent. And if we recall, with each of those, sine was opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine was adjacent over hypotenuse. And old Tanny boy, tangent is opposite over adjacent. All right. So when we're taking a look at this here, this first part is just a review of what we have been talking about. Okay. Just a reminder, this is all about perspective. Okay. Depending on what angle you're standing at is going to determine which of these words you're going to use. All right. Now, when we do this here, let's keep in mind that they're asking us to find one of these segments here. And so in this case, that segment is just this right here. So if I'm going to view this triangle from the 72 perspective, okay, I'm going to view this triangle here from the perspective of the 72. Looks like my cat is going to join us here. Here he is. Hello. Say hi to Phoenix. All right. We have to be able to understand how this triangle is going to look. Anytime I'm looking at this here, I always want to be able to identify what side of the triangle is what. Okay, so maybe this is the first thing that you want to do. Okay, I feel that the easiest one to always connect, or at least to identify, is the hypotenuse. And that always happens away from the right angle, the side opposite of the right angle. Okay. Now, the other things that are going to be needing now is I'm going to have to identify what side is the opposite of the angle in question and what side is the adjacent of the angle in question here. All right. So this is going to help us determine which word to use. So it looks like from this angle, I'm using an adjacent and a hypotenuse. Okay. So just be reminded, I use a trig word, I have my angle, and then right there is where my ratio exists. Okay. So if I have an adjacent and a hypotenuse, cosine is going to be the word that I use. Cosine of 72. And again, it has to be adjacent over the hypotenuse. So 31 over x. All right. So it's cosine of 72 equals 31 over x. Remember, we're just using some cross multiplying here to set this up. When we do this here, it's going to be 31 is the same thing as x times the cosine of 72. Now remember, this cosine of 72 is basically a random decimal here. Okay. I was not prepared to not be there here, so I don't have any of my calculators. But I do have my cell phone calculator, which might be the most helpful. Okay, only because I think it's the hardest calculator to use. Okay. All right. So here's what I want to do here. What you might want to think about this is anytime that I have a trig word, in this case, cosine of 72. Okay. Oops. Here's a mistake here. So one thing I want to check is see how it's in the RAD mode. I'm going to shift that over by just hitting the degree. Okay. And I'm going to try that again. So 72 with the cosine. Okay. So this number right here, it's really x times 0.309 and then so on. Okay. Now I'm not going to write it like that. Okay. I'm going to keep it as the cosine of 72. But what I want to think about though is that this is really just a random decimal. So when I'm getting x by itself, I want to divide by that random decimal right there. Okay. So let's do that here. I have a 31. Let's see if I can speed this up a little bit so we can see everything. So we have a 31 divided by, and this is how I do it, 72. Don't hit equals, hit cosine, then equals there. Okay. So x would be 100, and then we'll just say 0.3, right? It doesn't give us any kind of specification of when or where to round, excuse me. All right. Remember, at any point, you could pause this video and just try it on your own, right? You don't have to wait for me to show you here. All right, so for the second one, again, think about this here. We need to have a trig word, we need to have our angle, and then our ratio, okay? The first thing it's trying to ask us to do, I guess I didn't do a good job here of doing this, so it should be like this right here, right? So we can include the ST. The ST is right here. My recommendation is to try to identify the hypotenuse first. Then from this angle right here from the 36, I can identify what is the opposite and what is the adjacent side. Thinking about what we have here, okay? It looks like it's given us the opposite and the hypotenuse. That means it's the sine of 36. And then it's going to be opposite over the hypotenuse. So it's just 5.1 over x. I'm just noticing that on this first one, I didn't even identify the right thing here. So I was supposed to find EF, which is down here. Okay. So if I change this, and I'm sorry about that, that should be changed, but let's just change this to ED. Okay. EF would take on a whole new thing. And that would be the tangent. And then I could find the tangent of 72 equals x over 31. All right. So that's on me. Right here, the sine of 36 right here. So again, we're just going to use some cross multiplication. So it's 5.1 times 1, and then x times sine of 36. Remember, that sine of 36 is just a random decimal here. So we're going to divide that by the sine of 36 to get that out of there. So what do we have here? We have 5.1 divided by 36. And again, I'm going to use the sine button here to come up with 8.7. All right, 8.7 right there. Now, that's how we do side links. There is something else that's happening here on this paper. We are asked to find angles here below. All right, so we're going to do the same thing, sine, cosine, tangent. The difference here is that what we don't have is we don't have the angle measure. All right, so again, let's identify here what the hypotenuse is. In relation to this angle right here, it looks like the 25 is the opposite. And we have our adjacent. So in reference to this angle, again, the way that we've always done this is we needed a trig word, we needed our angle, and our ratio here. The ratio, because it's from this perspective and it have an opposite and a hypotenuse, that would be 25 over 36. Also, because I have an opposite and a hypotenuse, it's sine. Now, again, this is the one that we don't have as the angle. Okay, so I'm still going to set it up the same way, where I take the sine of a number is 25 over 36. I'm going to still look at this as cross multiplication. Actually, check that. We're not going to look at this as cross multiplication. I excuse me. The reason why we don't want to look at this as cross multiplication is because I don't want to divide by the word sign. All right. So don't cross multiply. But take a look at it this way here. All right. So in order to separate the word sign from the question mark, we have to use a different button on the calculator here. Okay. And it's this right here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my handy dandy calculator here and I'm going to divide 25 by 36 because again, that's what the ratio says, 25 divided by 36. And when I do that, I get a decimal, right? That makes sense. But instead of just going to hit the sign button, what I want to do here is I want to hit second and I get the -1, right? And this happens on regular calculators too. Okay, that is actually going to take the inverse of the sign operation, and that shows me that my angle is 43.98. I believe it's asking us to round it to the nearest degree. So that's just 44 degrees right there. So it's the same exact setup, except for we're not going to cross multiply, but we're going to use that inverse button on our calculator, whether that's a handheld one or your cell phone. Okay, again, we're going to view things from this perspective right here. Looks like we do have a hypotenuse listed with an adjacent and an opposite. Because I have an opposite and a hypotenuse, that looks like that's going to be the sine. And again, the question mark of 2/5. I need to separate this. So what I'm going to do here is not just divide it, but use that new button that we're talking about with the -1 right there. All right. So let's take a look at that here. Again, 2 divided by 5, it's just 0.4. I could use my, make sure that that -1 is there, right? Don't hit it if it doesn't have a -1, 23.57 or 24 degrees. I'd encourage you here, pause this to try a couple of them. Okay, just 2 left here. Again, take a look at identifying what we have here as a hypotenuse. Again, from this perspective right here, we're labeling this as the adjacent and the opposite. Okay, go ahead and pause it. Try it. Because we have the adjacent and the hypotenuse, we know it's a cosine. Again, we're not sure of the angle. Cosines are always adjacent over the hypotenuse. And now we have a chance to practice finding where this cosine button is. Okay, notice when I'm using angle measures, that's when I use this button that I'm really trying to reinforce in the red. All right, so I have 27 divided by 39. I'm going to take the cosine of the -1. Looks like it's 46.18 or just 46 degrees. Okay, last one here, guys. Last one. All right, it looks like, again, we're going to be viewing things from this perspective, which means that this is going to be the hypotenuse because of the right angle. Looks like I'm given a adjacent and an opposite. In order to do that, that's a tangent, right? Remember, SOHCAHTOA, that mnemonic phrase is there to help us. All right, so I have a tangent here of the angle is the same as 20 over 21, opposite over adjacent. Now we've had a chance here, or we will have a chance to practice using all 3 of these buttons with a -1 on it. So what do I have here? I have a 20 divided by 21 right there. And now I just need to take the tan to the -1. That's 43.6. So that would just be 44 degrees. All right. So here's what I really want you to focus on. There might be some problems on today's assignment in which you need to find both the side lengths and an angle measure. Don't forget all the tools you have. Okay. Here's what I mean by that. Maybe a problem here, they're giving you a problem here and they're asking you to find the measure of angle S. Don't do any trig, just use some common sense here. I know that all three have to add up to be 180, so just find the third angle that way, okay? You might have to use some trig then to find some of these side lengths, right? But notice here, the reason I had to use that trig is because it only gave me one angle. That was the 90-degree angle on each one of these. All right, so here is your assignment here. Again, continue to work on the 8-3 trig side lengths as necessary, but the same assignment, but now it's just for angle measures here. Okay, it's the same assignment, but now it's for angle measures. All right, I hope to see you guys soon, and I will be in touch with you until then.